The third installment of the Sonic the Hedgehog movie franchise is here. It came out on the 20th of December, and we watched it recently, and we're going to be sharing our thoughts about it here. I have to say that overall, I'm really impressed with this movie. I think it's the best in the trilogy. There were a couple things that I took a little bit of issue with, but I think there's a lot more good than bad, so without further ado, let's get into it. Now, before we go much further, I'm just going to warn you guys that we will be talking about some spoiler territory things in this video. So if you haven't seen the movie and you don't wish to be spoiled, click off the video now because we are definitely going to be talking spoilers in this video.
You've been warned.
First off, I want to say that Shadow was done beautifully in this movie. And the reason I mentioned Shadow first is because Shadow is clearly the big new shiny feature that this entry brings to the movie franchise. And he is really, really good. I like how he looks in the movie. I think his design is great. I think that his story is very compelling. I think Keanu Reeves was a perfect choice to voice him. He sounds just like you would picture Shadow sounding. Everything about Shadow's depiction, minus a few lines that were a little cringy, but everything else was great. I liked it.
The concept was spot on. It looked like Shadow walked straight out of Sonic Adventure 2 or Sonic X. No difference. It was a completely flawless transition.
And this leads me into a discussion about the characters in the movie. I think from what I've read, the characters are mostly really well received by most viewers. For me, it's a little bit of a mixed bag. So I'll say something a little controversial here. I don't really like how Sonic and Knuckles are depicted in these movies. I'm not saying that they're awful, but I just think Sonic and Knuckles' humor is just a little too immature. I think that, they don't really have any jokes that actually land, to be honest. And I think that Sonic and Knuckles, their humor is like it was written for 5 to 8 year olds. I know a lot of people don't agree with that, but I just don't like how duncy they made those two. I'm sorry, I just don't.
It's not like the humor doesn't make any sense. It's just that you can't really see that coming out of Knuckles' mouth. That's what I get from it anyway.
Between Sonic and Knuckles, I think Knuckles is definitely the worse off of the two. I'm not saying his design is bad, and I think even his voice would be okay if he was played differently. But the way his character is played is you can't really take him seriously regardless of whatever situation he's in. And that's because he's just such a meathead that nothing about him is ever played straight. And therefore, he's a character that doesn't have any real value to him other than just being constant comic relief. And I don't really think that fits Knuckles. Knuckles is a character that should practically be followed by a laugh track in this movie franchise. I'm sorry. Take what happened with the Chaos Emerald, for example. The fact that he had some dude guarding it that was just playing hockey with it, that didn't really fit with me. I know some people might have got a laugh out of that, but I think something like the Master Emerald should have been treated with more respect than that, but that's just how I saw it.
It really defeats Knuckles as a character because the way I knew Knuckles was he was very prudent. He was very stern and very serious about the roles that was given to him. Like if he was given the Chaos Emerald to protect it, that's what he would do. He's a guardian. And this scene alone just really undermines that. And it's not really Knuckles. Knuckles is, not trying to sound redundant here, but Knuckles is a very prudent, very hard-headed, very serious Riku-type character. This doesn't do any of that. If anything, it undermines it.
Again, I'm not saying that Knuckles is bad. If you find the stuff that he does funny, then that's great. I'm glad you got a laugh out of it. But I just don't see Knuckles as a character that I can really take seriously in any degree. And I think that the role of being a constant meathead kind of falls on Jim Carrey's Eggman, but we'll get to him a little bit later. As for the other characters, I do think Tails is a character that is much better off. I think Tails is a character that retained much of his identity going into this movie franchise.
Tails as a character stayed intact. I mean, I don't see anything really undermining his character here. He's the nerd type. He's always got your back. That's the way Miles has always been. I don't really see a significant change in his character. Sonic, however, I do see problems with him, but fortunately, it's not so much that you no longer recognize Sonic, but it's there for anyone who knows him.
Sometimes Sonic is a little too, how do I say, cotton candy, but at least he can be serious when the story really calls for it. On the other hand, I will say that I really enjoy Jim Carrey's performance of Eggman, and that's no exception in this movie. Ever since the trilogy began, he's been really good about playing this character. This has been one of Jim Carrey's best performances, and I think this version of Eggman pulls off the meathead stereotype really well. You know, a character that's always doing wacky and wild things, and you can't ever take them seriously. I think that, you know, this character commits to that, and because of that, it works. It's different than Knuckles, where you kind of feel like you should take him seriously at times, but because they never really let him do anything intelligent, you can't.
How can I put this for Eggman? It had the comedy that you wish was there. It was like a well-written fanfic. Jim Carrey brings good balance to the character, and it's actually an addition to Eggman's character.
And it wasn't only Eggman. This time it was also his grandfather, Gerald Robotnik, and let me just say they do some amazing stuff having Jim Carrey play those two characters. The laser dance scene had me laughing all the way throughout, and just a bunch of other stuff he does through the movie, like when the moon accidentally gets cut in half and he tries to blame the others for it, or just all his general banter with Sonic and Shadow throughout the movie. This character is just 100% of the time always funny, and his jokes actually land.
Yeah, I can't say enough good stuff about Gerald Robotnik. Absolute, pure, unadulterated comedy gold. It's like a fanfic of your dreams. You know how some fanfics go way too far? This one doesn't.
And I will say that the story is very compelling as well. At first, I thought this movie was going to move a little too fast, because when the movie starts out, you get to the encounter with Shadow very quickly. It's not an end of the movie thing. It's something that the movie starts, and you get to the part where we're fighting Shadow really, really fast. And at first I thought that it was going to go too quickly, but this movie knew how to keep the ground running and keep the plot good throughout it. And Shadow was always depicted as this edgy, emo type character. He even gets called Hot Topic at one point, which I thought was just hilarious. And it really fits, you know, what the internet has been saying about Shadow for a long time, that he is the edge in edginess or whatever. And almost everything Shadow says in the movie can be taken seriously. His dialogue is played in a way that it makes his story even more compelling. There was one little scene where he said "revenge guac," which on paper sounds hilarious, but when it's a character like Shadow, especially the story that he's presented with in this movie, I thought that was a little bit cringe and kind of took away from his genuinely serious arc that he had in the movie. But that weighed against all of the good stuff isn't much at all. Like, there's way more good than there is bad when it comes to Shadow, and overall I think he couldn't have really been handled better.
I can't really complain very much, and won't.
One of the things I really like about this movie is that when we first see Shadow, we think that it was Robotnik himself that unleashed Shadow upon the world. But it's later revealed that he also doesn't want Shadow running around. So, as you might have seen from the trailer, him and Sonic team up and they try to find a way to subdue Shadow. Well, later on, it's revealed that his grandfather, Gerald Robotnik, was actually the one behind Shadow's release. It was kind of a back and forth plot-wise. You never really knew what was going to happen. You know, one minute Robotnik was the friend, and he was trying to help Sonic and the others stop Shadow, and then he goes to his grandfather, and him and his grandfather start doing all kinds of villainous things together, but then his grandfather betrays him, and then he's suddenly a good guy again, and he helps Sonic and friends save the world. And at the end, you get the sense that there's a side of Robotnik that's not entirely evil, but he just wants to flex his intellectual muscle, and he does that in this movie, as he does in the other two movies. The dude is smart. That much can't be denied.
And further clarification, the Robotnik, Dr. Eggman, he is not mentally ill. However, I can't say the same for Gerald.
I also want to say that it is actually kind of touching at the end of the movie when he finally shows a shred of appreciation towards his assistant, who he's verbally abused throughout the entire trilogy, but now he somewhat acknowledges him.
It's good he stopped being I don't know what Google would approve of, so I'm just gonna, let you use your imagination as to what I was going to say. But now that he's not treating him as badly as he used to, he now realizes that he took him for granted, and he apologizes for it.
He apologizes for it because he realizes that he was the only person that ever really cared about him, and that's both hilarious and, shockingly enough, it's almost kind of heartbreaking at the same time. I never thought that I would ever feel sorry for a character that was practically pure comic relief, but this movie found a way to make me do that.
I asked myself, where did he go? Did he survive?
Yeah, Yeah, the end of the movie leaves Dr. Eggman's fate undecided, and all I'm going to say is I really hope Jim Carrey is in the series going forward, because here's the thing. Despite my problems with the trilogy, I think the trilogy has always had a lot more good than bad. I think the movies have always had good comedy overall, they've always had good plots overall, and they've always had a lot of respect for the games, which I've always really appreciated. And I think a big part of that is Jim Carrey's portrayal of Dr. Eggman. And I think if going forward he's not going to be in the series anymore, it's going to lose something vital. It's not going to be what it was. I'm not saying that it can't be good without him, because they might find a way to still make it good, and if they do, that's great, but I really hope that he's in the franchise going forward, because I think at this point he's a vital piece of it.
Jim Carrey made me an Eggman fan. I always thought that Eggman was interesting, but it's like I said before. I have watched post-credits to see what happened to a villain, but it was only because I wanted to know whether there was going to be a sequel or not. This is the first time where I'm like, are you okay? You know, are you here? And are you going to make me laugh again? You know? Usually it's like, you had this coming, I'm not surprised. You know.
Please put him in any future sequels, Paramount. I don't care if you have to retcon this into absolute oblivion. Just find a way to put him in the future movies. Because like I said, I'm not saying they'll be bad without him, but I do think they'll be losing a vital piece. I don't think they will be as good without him.
It'll be bland going forward. We need that comedy in there.
So with that being said, this pretty much concludes our thoughts on the film. It might have sounded a little negative at first when I was talking about Sonic and Knuckles, but don't get me wrong, just because I don't think Sonic and Knuckles' portrayal is perfect, it doesn't mean I think it's horrible, and I think that this movie, by and large, is really good, as the trilogy is by and large really good. I've always had fun watching these movies, and, you know, at the end of the day, if you're having fun, that's kind of the movie's job, right?
There's more positives than negatives here, and I will be pre-ordering the movie.
Yeah, I'm excited to have that DVD on my shelf, or in my case, UHD 4K Blu-ray, but, you know.
Bling, bling.
Anyways, if you like the video, like, comment, and subscribe.
And Merry Christmas.
Even though Christmas is over, Merry late Christmas.
Merry late Christmas. Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas to all, and to all a good night.